think I need to intro tonight's guest. I think we all know what we're doing here. It's really exciting.
I'm so glad. What a great theater and presentation, and it's so great to see a big crowd see it this way and hear it this way, and it's so thank you for coming out.
So we were watching a little bit of the movie up there at the top of the stairs, and just wondering, because it's been a little while since you wrapped, since you finished it. How's it feel to watch it? Is it like, oh, I should have done something different? Oh, or
Yeah, it hasn't quite reached that phase for me yet. But that will come if I were watch it again a couple of years from now or something. No, what I really appreciate is the spirit of the production, and I just see it in all of these scenes. So most everything was written, but there was a lot that was just discovered along the way through research, through kind of understanding the procedure itself, the mechanics of it, the support system, the logistics, and and just everyone was working so hard. We tried to do what we could to create the environment. And then everyone worked so well to inhabit it in the most authentic way. But the two things sort of worked hand in hand. An example of that is that the very first thing that we actually had to shoot for logistical reasons, because it doesn't make much sense, creatively, because there's so much pressure on the scene, is the scene where Rick and John arrive and actually see the boys for the first time. And that wound up being the very first thing we had to shoot. And on that day, we'd been training, working with the boys, rehearsing them. None of them were professional actors because they all. I needed kids who from the northern region because the dialect is so different, and I knew there'd be a great deal of improvisation amongst the boys. And so I just knew we had to get authentic boys, and we worked closely with them, and I had a lot of help from our Thai co-producers. And through our COVID period of isolation, and then on into our couple of weeks of rehearsal, and finally this day of shooting. But still, couldn't be sure what it was going to be like. And between Molly Hughes's caves, what Viggo and Colin had learned about the diving from the real guys, Rick Stanton and Jason Mallinson were there, dealing with their dive equipment. And the boys were so prepared and so inhabited these characters by then that we did our very first take, and it's in the movie. And Viggo came over to me and said, "It's like we don't have to act with these boys. They're just there, and the cave is here, and our gear is with us." And I think in a lot of ways that sort of set the stage and kind of established the tone and the way we were going to work every single day of the shoot, which is create the environment and try to bring it to life with as much knowledge and insight as we could.
It sounds like the production community that was created, like you're talking about, it was a sort of a process of discovery and research and to some degree improvisation, almost mimicked the story that's being told, where everyone is just trying to figure out something that works. So there was that sort of dual sense of community going on.
I think, yeah, we were a very safe and well-paid version of that. But I never had a crew or a company complain less on a movie, and it was pretty rough. I mean, for a movie, it was cold. It was, it was Australia, but we were getting to the point at the time of year where it was starting to be chilly, and everyone was wet, whether we were in the caves or out there in our fake movie rain. And people who began to, reach that point where they would normally bitch and moan. All they had to do was just remember what people had really done and really gone through to make this story possible for us to tell it. And I think that we just all respected the fact that what the people who lived this gave us is this fantastic object lesson in what is possible. And so I just, I think we all took, felt a large measure of responsibility, but also it became fascinating, just trying to understand it and share it. So you asked me my reaction to it. I'm sort of beat for beat, very, very happy with the way the details kind of find their way found their way into these scenes and informed things.
It's very rich. It's always like packed with things happening, right? There's always sort of a lot happening in every frame, a lot of currents going on. I'm curious how closely you were following this story when it was in the news, when it was going on. Did it capture your imagination at the time?
I was aware. My wife Cheryl was one of those people who was really, really glued to it and knew more about it and was filling me in on it. And I certainly was aware and relieved by the outcome. And I felt that dread that, oh, this sounds like it's an impossible scenario. And then you know, really, you know, relieved by the outcome. No idea what the strategies were. When I read Bill Nicholson's screenplay, I was surprised in the very best kinds of ways. But I immediately started looking things up just to verify that he wasn't just making a bunch of stuff up here. I found that his research was fantastic, sure, we continued to learn more, and I knew we would, and I knew we could bring more detail and dimension to, you know, other plots beyond the divers, and that we would do all of that work. But I really appreciated the way he sort of captured the essence of the story, the tough decisions that he made long before I was involved about what to leave out and what to focus on, and it was just a tremendous jumping off place. But it really remained, you know, kind of our bedrock throughout. But it was great. You know, it was fascinating. Things like the village elder splitting the bamboo. Well, that wasn't in the original script. But then I was looking at Tanet, the real Tanet, the Tsari's, you know, photos and just iPhone footage and stuff like that he sent us after I had a chance to interview him. And I said, what's with the pole, the bamboo, you know? And he explained the whole thing, and I just immediately, you know, said, well, that's in. We have to do that. And it was great because our guy who was playing the elder is from Bangkok. He's not from the north, so he was having to do an accent the whole time. But he's like an old rocker or something, you know. And yet, when the props came out to split the bamboo, the prop team was getting ready to show him how to do it, and he just kind of waved him off and just so he just had to do it. Yeah.
So you talked about reading the script and the sort of search for the authenticity and the sort of making sure you got all the details right, but it's more than that, right? It's because it's not a documentary, right? It's there's a.
Well, I knew that there had already been like a 5 or 6 hour series that Thai PBS had done, but the BBC had also jumped on it and embellished it. Nova did a portion of it. Nat Geo had an hour of it that they had done. And then Jimmy and Chai, I knew were making a documentary because one of our producers was producing both.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, and I knew that Jimmy and Chai didn't really want us to see what they were up to, and I didn't see their film until ours was done. But when I did see it, I thought they did a fantastic job. And I felt like the two were kind of companion pieces if you're really interested in this story. And the thing that I felt about it, going into it. And there were other scripts being developed, and you know, there's a sort of a miniseries version that can be seen on Netflix, and I'm all for as many versions of this story getting out there as possible.
What is it about the story? What is it about the story?
It's about this, you know, it's just the international group coming together, putting aside all the differences, and it's not entirely smooth or pretty, but the Thai government did a tremendous job of, without ever abdicating responsibility, of making it possible for outsiders to come in and provide some support, and you know, and there was just this commitment. It's what our governor character said, you know, it's for the love of the boys, and that commitment was there. The interesting thing to me was that almost everyone who was on the inside of this, whether they were up on the mountain trying to drain the water away, or, by the way, a lot of other things going on up there that didn't ultimately move the needle, but people were up there doing a lot of work, trying to find cave systems down into it. And I mean, there was just a tremendous amount of volunteerism. Of course, those farmers making those sacrifices, which is absolutely what happened. What struck me, not in my first couple of reads, but after a while when I began talking to people who'd been involved, no one thought there was going to be a triumphant outcome here. And they were still there. And so many of the people, such a high percentage of the people who really did make a difference in the rescue didn't have to be there. They were volunteers. And I just think it's they set a remarkable example of what is possible. And that's really what drove me. I sometimes on my script I'll write a kind of a simple sentence or a phrase or something for myself. For Apollo 13, the more I learned about it on my script, I just put just show it. When I was doing Parenthood, I said greatest sitcom ever told. On this one, it was Anatomy of a Miracle, because everyone involved felt like something beyond, whether they were religious or not, kind of had to have happened. Things had to come together in a particular way to have realized this outcome. And while they all took pride in their role, each and every one of them, none of them take responsibility.
It's interesting you say that, this Anatomy of a Miracle, because it's in a way the story is so much bigger than any of the individual characters. It's the story that's sort of driving it. It's not the characters that are driving it. The characters are almost very very muted in a sense. Their performances are kind of like down here. Mm-hmm. So what was the process like of directing the characters to sort of keep their performances at a certain level so they didn't overwhelm the story?
Yeah, well, we certainly, we wanted to avoid, kind of overt sentimentality or forced sentimentality, because we knew there was a lot of emotion there, and it sort of, it didn't have to be pushed forward, thrust on the audience. I think in my recent years, the last 5, 7, 8 years of working on documentaries has also informed my sensibility a little bit in and around things like that. And what can register for an audience in a different way, a more honest way, and often a simpler way. Also, a lot of it was just inspired by the individuals, because what a year Colin Farrell has had. But look at the range of characters he's played. But there's a reason he's this guy, is because he spent some time with John Volantin, talking to John Volantin, hanging out, understand. And so John is a very unassuming guy, and Colin, just inhabited that to the point where John, who's a like a, I don't know, I forgot what it's called, super marathon, where they run 120 miles. It's sort of mimicking the initial Olympics in Greece. A Spartathlon, I think it's called. John Volantin runs those, and Colin decided that he would run a marathon. And he trained.
That's like serious method, actually.
Well, I think he also felt like there was a message here. There was something calling him in a reason beyond the movie and the job that he was playing this character, and it did mean a lot to him. And then I found out that there was a marathon in Brisbane that he wanted to run on a Sunday. We were shooting Monday, and I said, I don't want to stop you from running your marathon, Colin, but you know how tight this schedule is, and I'm not going to be able to take it easy for you. Not only can I not give you the day off, it's a pretty fucking hard scene that we're going to do.
And they were doing their swimming, right?
Oh, they did all of it.
Yeah.
I can explain that in a second. But this was swimming, but it was also like lugging those tanks over through the cave and all that stuff. Well, diving, yeah. And he ran the marathon, finished it, very happy with himself. He was really, really in bad shape on Monday. Tried not to show it, but man, he was suffering. And I was kind of chortling a little myself. But he did both things. He ran the marathon and did his work on Monday. Yeah, well, see, Rick Stanton and Jason Mallinson were our technical advisors. So John and Chris couldn't be there in person. They were both working and had family obligations that prevented them from going to Queensland, which is where we shot most of it. But Rick and Jason could come, and they did. And when Viggo, who's good in the water and experienced, Colin, you know, they'd been certified before, but they all got recertified on their own before they ever came and you know, went through quarantine and then went through our sort of, we didn't have a long time. I think I had 3 weeks for them after quarantine before we started shooting, maybe only 2, a couple of weeks with the kids and the other actors. But they started training. And first of all, Rick and John from afar and Jason have been very helpful to Molly Hughes, our production designer, in terms of helping us understand, after we looked at the specs, which portions of the cave were the most challenging, the most threatening to the operation, most difficult to navigate. And those were the sections that Molly replicated. We built 4 different tunnel systems and 3 different chambers, and kept sort of doubling things up and moving them around. Well, once Rick and Jason dived those real caves, they couldn't believe it, how real it was. But they were also tricky, and because more often than not, they were just they were just a tunnel, and about the length of the theater here, so the guys had to learn not only to look like they were understood cave diving, but they really needed to be functional from a safety standpoint, and they did all that work. And then Viggo was the first to come to me, and Colin was right there in league with him, and said, "Look, I don't want to be doubled, because this diving is so particular, and I've learned the technique, and I want there to be consistency in it. And look, so much of my character sort of played out underwater. I want that to be my performance." And I said, "Well, that's great, Viggo. I understand, man. I respect it. But, we're not scheduled for that, and I'm not sure it's safe anyway. And I hadn't planned for that. I planned for you to do a lot of diving and for us to design shots for you to be in, but not that." And he said, "Well, I really would like you to work it out if you can, and I will show up on Saturdays. I'll just the minute you're done with me on the dialogue unit, send me to the water unit, and I'll do it. And I think everyone else will." And they all confirmed. Well, once our safety people and our second unit team did confirm that they were fine. They were going to be very competent and safe. We worked it out, and lo and behold, we did what we could do, but mostly they just extended themselves, and they did it all. They did every single shot. Wow. They brought so much.
The film was beautiful and inspiring, and at times it was really hard to watch. There were parts that were really, really hard to watch. The scene especially for me, and I don't know if it's the same for maybe some others, where the divers were preparing the boys' bodies. Yeah. It was almost violent, but in this sort of tender, life-saving way. It was really, really challenging as a viewer to take that, and very, very complicated.
I'll tell you about that. So much of the movie, again, it was there, it was explained, but we sort of experienced it as we were going along in our own way. And so, again, this was really thoroughly prepared. Bill Connor, the first AD, and also one of the producers of the film, is great about this. He's so organized. And all the background people, they weren't people just showing up on the day. They were people who had learned the task, whether it's rolling up or unrolling the hose and working the pumps and cooking, and it was great. So we had all of these, we call these scenarios, these little vignettes that we were just basically borrowing from the news footage that we had running. I usually I build a style reel, and I have it running constantly in the production office and the art department and my office, just sort of with the sound off nonstop. And then I ask all the department heads to put all of their research visuals just up on the walls, just color Xeroxes, especially heading to the bathroom and the kitchen, because that way I know people will really see it. But soon we have a shared aesthetic, a sense of what's truthful and what's honest, and we begin working toward that. Now, one of the things that we needed to do was put a stunt person in the rig and have Jason and Rick show us, what was entailed. How much of it were we going to shoot? What did it really look like? How long did it take? And they did it with a stunt. It was one of the doubles for the kids underwater. We had two just professional divers, and both were women. They're about the right size, and so they performed this process. Jason leading them through this and tying and clipping and all of it. The person was awake, obviously, the stunt person. But I watched it, and it was emotional. We all watched it. We just watched it play out. And I said, we have to show all of this. It does break your heart. And then when we got to the editing room, I still wasn't certain we were really going to use it all. James Wilcox, our editor, just felt exactly the same way. And one of our big challenges, and James was so, I just saw that he was nominated today, and so was Sayampu for a couple of different awards regionally. Made me very, very happy to hear that today, because their work was so meaningful. So much of this was about us having 7 different dives, and 3 of them with the boys, and how do we differentiate them? So the first one was entirely about process and just understanding how harrowing, exhausting, and grueling it was. And the second one was more about kind of media and everyone being just, the outsiders not really knowing what was going on and what was entailed and how difficult it was. And the third one was all about the encroaching weather and the race against time. But James did just a great job of helping to lead that process of really understanding what each of these scenes could deliver and how much of that density we could sort of maintain throughout.
I could ask questions for hours, but I want to give some of you a chance to ask some questions.